Kathleen and I have been married over 40 years. Oh. Which, and she has taught me so much. And that's one of the things about the first part of the contribution, about just the two of us, because that's the way it starts. You fall in love, and you want to share your life with this person who means all the world to you, and no one else is as important. It's a most wonderful feeling, and in many ways it reflects, I think, the spiritual union and our ultimate destination, paradise with our families and those who've gone before us and shared our faith. It is a journey too, coming together as a couple. And I think one of the important things, I remember when I was a bit younger than most of you, I was still at school, I went on a leadership course with other teenagers, and we had a contribution on marriage. And I remember it very well because of the impact it had, particularly on my wife. We made a few notes. And I made a few notes. I'm glad none of you are writing any of this down. I made a few notes on a little notepad about this. And one of the things that I remember, and which my wife discovered about 2 or 3 months after we were married, amongst my effects, things that I'd brought into the relationship, this little notebook. And she noticed it said, identifying a life partner, marriage, commitment. And she read a few things and she said, wait a minute, there's something in here that says, were you doing this to me? That said, if you want to have an idea about how your wife, your husband will relate to you in 5 or 10 years, go to their family home and see how your prospective husband or wife relates to her mother, her father, brothers or sisters, because that will be how the relationship will be with you in that sort of time. I obviously took this to heart because I wrote it down, and she said, "Look, is that what you were doing, selecting me? But just checking on me." But we discussed it, and over the years we both discovered that actually the environment we're brought up with, our own childhood, and our own experiences in childhood have a huge influence on our attitudes as adults. And what we bring into the relationship is our family experiences. Good or bad, we bring them. I remember the very first time we had a little argument. It was about something very minor. I can't remember what it was about. Maybe I was just a bit untidy, didn't put the socks away somewhere, or I couldn't find where something was. And, Kathleen, whose family is very expressive and shows their emotions very easily, got quite upset. And the family I came from was quite different. We didn't express our emotions in that way. So obviously, we didn't cry so easily. We didn't have little rows and then made up afterwards. Things got resolved, but in a much sort of slower way. And I thought she was having a nervous breakdown. I mean, this was something I hadn't experienced before. And every time this happened, I gradually appreciated that, no, this is because I've had a different experience from her. So I think, that is something that in a relationship you'll discover. And I'm sure some of you have already begun to do that. Why do you behave in certain ways in certain situations? It's what you bring into the relationship, and we have to be aware of that and learn about it and discuss it and share it. One of the things in the I just got here a copy of our order of service as our wedding and the promises that we made, and we had a rather traditional wedding in many ways of the promises, but I think the sense of them is much the same. You have come here freely without reservation to give yourselves to each other in marriage. Will you love, honor each other as man and wife for the rest of your lives? And when you're in love, yes, of course. You don't always appreciate what a tremendous promise that is, to love and honour each other for the rest of your lives. Will you accept children lovingly from God if you're able to have children and bring them up according to the law of Christ and his church? We're going to discuss that in the second half. And then the promise itself, which we both made. I take thee, I take you to my wedded wife. That's what I said to Kathleen. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. And she made the same promise to me. Now at the time, we were so keen to up and get married, they did have a meaning. Of course they did. But the meaning of those promises becomes a reality as you live a life together. And just to look through some of those promises. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse. No matter what happens to you, what happens to me, what happens, experiences that we have, I'm going to love and cherish you. In sickness and in health. Chronic illness of any kind, can be a real burden within a family, and it can strike at any time. Till death do us part. This lifelong commitment. It is really quite a daunting promise to make. And in many ways, when in the early part of your relationship, the fact that you're in love with each other, these commitments are easier to make. But it's only subsequently that you begin to appreciate the real commitment that you've made here. And also, in a Christian marriage, as myself and Kathleen are in, which we conferred on each other, and which some of you, maybe, some of you are already in that situation, some are considering it, and some, please God, will enter a lifelong partnership like that. That these promises require an awful lot of grace to fulfill. They really do. I rather view it, and Kathleen, we have the same. We've had a range of experiences, and I'll share some of them with you a little bit later in our married life. And we both feel that our faith and our commitment to these, to each other, and the fact that this union has been blessed by God, putting that commitment in and drawing on the strength of the sacrament, it's a bit like money in the bank, It's always nice to have a bit of reserve, isn't it, in there, that you can draw on when times are hard. And in any relationship, in any marriage, you will come across hard times. So it's very, very important to have that reserve in the bank. And that is built up through little kindnesses, thought. It's built up through prayer too, individual and as a couple. And those times when times are hard and tough are when you need to draw on the strength of the sacrament which you've conferred on each other and witnessed by your friends and family and blessed by a priest. So the different people that we are provides a real challenge for us. Now, just considering the other part of our marriage service, which I always remember, it's the reading of St. Paul to the Corinthians. Be ambitious for the higher gifts. And the last phrase of that reading, which is so often used in marriage ceremonies, is the nature of love itself. And listen to this: love is always patient and kind. Now that's hard, to be patient and kind when you're not feeling too good, and you can be rather irritable. Not easy to do. It is never jealous. It is never boastful or conceited. It is never rude or selfish. And we can be selfish in a relationship too. It does not take offence and is not resentful. So when Kathleen points something out to me that maybe I've been a little bit thoughtless. I've forgotten a birthday, or heaven's sake, I've even maybe forgotten an anniversary or something, which has happened. And I've been reminded of that I don't become defensive. The natural response is, we defend our own positions, don't we? And I remember this reading. Love makes no pleasure in other people's sins, but delights in the truth. It's ready to excuse, to trust, to hope, and to endure whatever comes. And the last phrase, which I particularly love, we both do, love does not come to an end. Even though the relationship may come to an end through death, the commitment and the love that we've had and the influence that we've had on each other is eternal. And we know that. It's one of the most important things in any Christian life. It is love. God is love. And we have the opportunity of really learning what love is and experiencing it, not just in the emotional sense, which is wonderful, but the fruits of love, which are patience, kindness, self-control, all these things which we need to draw upon. We need our sacrament to draw upon, to be able to practice them. It's not easy. In a relationship too, between man and woman, one of the things you learn is that basic male and female sexuality are rather different. And that in the male attitude to sex is a bit more instant and immediate than the female, the woman's attitude. After all, it is the woman who is going to carry a child, and the long-term commitment of that is more obvious to the female mind than it is to the male mind. That's just the way we're built. So that sexual relationships have a rather different meaning in terms of commitment. A commitment for the female is total because of the long-term implications that can ensue because of pregnancy and child rearing. A major event. And it is ultimately during the pregnancy that if men had to have babies, I think there'd be a few less of them. But anyway, that's always something. So that is also something that we have to learn in a relationship. I mean, sex has a wonderful ability to provide reassurance, and men do need a lot of reassurance in that particular area. Women, well, I can't speak. I'm not a female, but I mean, I've lived with one for a long time. It has a rather different significance. The other thing too about relationships is that I think I'm making some generalizations here, but they have in a sense been borne out by my own experience and the experience of other couples that we've known well over the years, is that it's very difficult to change your partner, your husband or your wife. No matter how much you think you're going to do this, it's not going to happen. So if you go into a relationship with the expectation that, there's this little bit here, which this part of this person's personality and the way they respond to things, or the way they respond emotionally to things, I can deal with that. That's going to change, isn't it? It isn't. It isn't going to change. It's going to stay the same. Okay, what you do with your feelings and emotions can change, but the basic person that you are, is based on your family experiences, just your emotional equipment that you have to deal with, the kind of personality that you have. You can control these things, you can learn to live with them, and you can learn to adapt your behavior. And that takes some commitment, not to do the instant thing that you know, that you immediately feel you should be responding to. Sometimes you have to think, hang on a moment, that I know causes anxiety and worry and hurt to my husband or wife, therefore I'll try and play that aspect down. So you won't change. And that's a very important thing to consider. You will both, in the relationship, you will develop over years a couple persona. In successful marriages, you see this, because over time, both partners have such an intimate knowledge of their partner's personality and the way they respond to situations that you can almost read what's going to happen. You know, it's amazing. You know, Kathleen and myself very often, faced with a situation, come up with a very similar response, because I know what she's thinking and she knows what I'm thinking. And we've learnt to, like a dance, you know, how in a dancing, you know, you see people together. It's a matter of give and take, and it's a wonderful thing when it's pointed out to you. You aren't always aware of this, but it takes some practice and a few stumbles along the way before this begins to emerge. Again, from the marriage ceremony, there's some lovely prayers at the end, usually, and there's a range of them, and I've just picked the ones out that we had at our own. Here they are. Where is it? Here we go. Here it is. God the Eternal Father, keep you in love with each other, so that the peace of Christ may stay with you and always be in your home. A lovely prayer. May your friends console you, and all men and women live in peace with you. Your friends console you. Isn't that great? You know, and Kathleen and I have certainly had experience of that. May you always bear witness to the love of God in this world, so that those who are needy will find in you generous friends and ultimately welcome you into the joys of heaven. This is a great charism, a great gift of marriage, is the rather like the Benedictine order, which you're famous for, Bishop, isn't it? Which is hospitality. And as a couple, to offer hospitality is wonderful for people who may be on their own or in trouble. We have my father, who was a very plain-speaking Australian, used to comment that my mother used to invite people into our family home for Sunday lunch and, you know, weekends and Christmas and things like that. And as children, we weren't always in agreement, because they were not always the most interesting people, rather needy people. And my father used to jokingly say, "Eileen, it's another one of your no-hopers at the door." But that is something too, which in a relationship, in a marriage relationship, if things are really going well, you generate this love and commitment, and you can share it with others. It's not just bring your children into the world, but it's also a tremendous gift that couples have, of being able to share that love and that hospitality. There's nothing more consoling than going into a family home where there's a happy family. You know, there may be an awful lot of noise, there may be children charging around, the place can be an absolute mess and turmoil, but if there is that love and commitment there, it's the most wonderful thing to experience. And very often, you know, in a marriage, couples aren't really aware that they're giving this gift to others. Bishop, you were saying, you were sort of commenting.
No, I just sort of agreeing with that.
All right. Okay, all right. Better than disagreeing, anyway.
There are other similarities with monastic life.
I'm sure.
Actually, funny enough, yeah.
Well, I'm sure there are. I mean, you know, there must be. I was just thinking about that too in your situation. Because getting on with people at close proximity isn't always easy, is it?
And it takes one a long time to realise that one's not going to change them.
Yep, this is true. This is true.
It is, yes.
Now, the final thing I want to just touch on is money, because it can cause a lot of arguments in families and between individuals. When you are committing to each other for life, you're committing your goods and possessions, you're committing your whole life to this other person. And that includes any emotional attributes you bring, but also what financial resources you have. So, quite a few, in early years of marriage, this can cause significant problems or arguments. It's a good idea to try and resolve these things before you're married, if you can. Are you going to have separate accounts? Are you going to have a joint account? How are you going to deal with the financial aspects? Is it one breadwinner or is it two? How are you going to manage your family affairs? Who is the best person within the relationship to do that? I mean, I'm not very good at the balance sheet, but Kathleen is. Her brother's an accountant. Her father used to run a shop. So she had experience in that area. So I devolved that responsibility to her. But that doesn't always work. In other situations, it may be the other way around. But if it's an area where it's very important to discuss how you're going to run your financial affairs very early on in your marriage, or before, preferably. I've certainly seen relationships where there have been sort of secret stashes of money in deposit accounts and things like that. And it happens. And if that's discovered, that's kind of lack of trust. It's not a total commitment. There's something you're holding back. And in these days, under financial pressure, it can cause significant problems. So please think about that. So, what have I covered so far? I've covered the wonderful commitment that marriage is, the daunting commitment that it is, the fact that within the sacrament of marriage, which we confer on each other as couples, as individuals, we have a tremendous resource which we will need to draw on. That money in the bank we're going to have to draw on at some time in the future when we do meet troubles and challenges. That we're very different people. We're not going to change each other. We're going to have to learn to live with each other. That male and female sexuality is rather different and needs to be addressed and considered. Money is important. Practicalities of running a family home and organising your money affairs. That's some aspects of being together. How do you maintain that contact within a relationship? Something that myself and Gail and Tony will know about is Catherine and myself have been involved with other Christian couples for many years, sharing some of our lives together. What we have done is we've met every month as couples to share our joys and sorrows, the good things, not so good things, to pray together as couples, and to discuss things relevant to family life. That's been very helpful to us. But the most important thing that we've taken from that experience over the years is a commitment at least once a month. It doesn't sound much, does it? At least once a month to sit down as a couple and to share with each other, what has my month been like? What has Kathleen's month been like? You might say, this is rather strange, isn't it? Because in a relationship, you'll be talking about yourselves and your feelings all the time. Well, once children come along, please God if they do. Once you have family commitments, once you have work commitments, when you've got houses to decorate and various other things, it's amazing how the busyness of life and work and everything else takes over. And you don't have time to sit down with each other and talk about what is really happening emotionally. What's been happening at work? Have I had any disappointments? Has anyone been causing me problems? Have I been coming up with a challenge that I'm finding difficult to meet? What's been happening in our relationship? Have we had time to spend time together? Have we just been working in parallel, alongside each other, rather than actually communicating? Very important to sit down and take stock. And the little formula that we used, and we found very helpful, is we go through this formula and we examine our relationship with God. What has our spiritual life been like? 2, how is our relationship with each other? How have we been getting on? As we've had children, and now we have grandchildren, what is our relationship with our children? And then the final one is the relationship with the wider world. People outside, friends, work, people in the workplace. It sort of covers most things. And you'd be surprised that kind of regular, we book an evening to do this. Take the phone off, close the mobile phones down, turn the computer off, don't watch the television. Just spend, it doesn't take long, maybe 20, 30 minutes to sit down and do this. And we've always found that doing this on a Friday is better than doing it on a Sunday evening. It's a waste of a weekend, Because if the weekend's when you've got time off, is when little niggles and things that have happened during the week can come out because you've got more time together. So you need to try and get on a good footing, before you have time away. Anyway, there's just a few thoughts. I'm sure those of you who are married are already experiencing these things. And so, just a short period now on second part, which is the changing relationship when children come. And things do change. Oh boy, they certainly do. In a very positive way, but also in ways which you probably hadn't anticipated. The actual joy of a baby being born into the world is just, staggering. It's just amazing. You just feel on cloud 9. Certainly if the fellas do. The ladies have had a hard job of doing this. It's pretty hard going. So it's nice to have support while the process is happening. And pregnancy itself, is hard work. It really is. Carrying this weight around, a sort of rucksack with a few rocks on it, strapped to your front. Walking. So after the initial joy of having a child, the responsibility sort of begins to dawn a little bit. This little person, for the first 3 months, you can walk around them in a Moses basket or something. They make a fair bit of noise, but you can continue some aspects of your life as a couple as before, but not for too long. You can't take little ones out with you, into the restaurant and to visit friends and everything quite so easily. And the amount of stuff you have to take with you. You need more. This little person needs more equipment and kit than both of you. I'm sure you've found that, those of you who have children. The relationship also changes quite. It can change, and things can happen which are not always predictable. Because certainly for the man, if the woman's going to be breastfeeding, is going to have that physiological bond with the baby, having given birth, and will be nurturing the baby. But fellas, you've got to get up and make the hot milk, and while the breastfeeding is going on, and keep the breast milk going, and take your share in nappy changing and all these other things. But it's almost like there's competition anymore. Your wife is no longer totally committed to you. Can't be. So there's an element of competition there, if you like. And that can take a little while to adapt to. You know, your wife isn't 100% your own anymore, and your husband isn't either. You've got this other person to look after. If you have, for the second child, of course, you have the other problem or challenge in that the first child loses their prime position in the family as well. And I remember when I was a trainee paediatrician years ago, a very wise paediatrician telling me about sibling rivalry. You've all had sibling rivalry, have you? You've got brothers and sisters. There's always this thing about you think one's got more favour than the other and whatever. Well, that happens at a very early age. It can happen at 18 months or 2, 3, 4, and the next one arrives. The emotions that a small child can go through and the sort of challenging behaviour that they can adopt or regress to earlier patterns is because of, how would you feel if you were a husband coming back from being out for a bit and you come back and your wife is sitting on someone else's lap, with your favourite coffee cup or something, and having a nice cuddle with your wife. You wouldn't like that, would you? That's the intensity of feelings that very often slightly older children have when the next one arrives. So these things have to be managed. Obviously, during child development, various things happen. All the wonderful stages of smiling and walking and communicating and talking and all these other things are great. But there's a fair bit of effort involved in supporting both of you through this. I heard someone say, "You've heard about the terrible twos, haven't you?" Well, excuse me, Bishop, but I've also heard recently about the effing fours. But no, there are stages in development when children require a lot of attention, and again, that can take away, the time commitment that you have for each other. So again, that is when the strength of the relationship, which you need to work on, and have occasional, just a night away, is so important. We had 4 children originally. We had one of our daughters died 4 years ago, tragically. But every time, every 3 months, without fail, we would try and arrange just a night, just not even 24 hours away, just 20 hours maybe, just so we could have a little bit of time together. And we called them stepping stones, because you have one, it's very nice to have another one to look forward to. I can see someone at the back thinking, you're doing that, are you? Or you'd like to, I don't know. But it's very, very important to make space for each other, and draw on family and friends to help. Just a bit of babysitting when you can do that. The other thing about bringing children into the world is, I remember very well discussing this with a chaplain once for one of our married couple teams, and we hadn't really thought of it that way before. But when children do come into the world, it's really you are co-creators with God in creating new life. This is the way in which we can get a much closer experience of what our God the Father, our God Creator, no doubt you'll hear more about this from Bishop. I'm not a theologian, but you'll hear more about this in the second part of the evening. But it is an awesome responsibility. But our children are children of God, just as we are. And we have the responsibility of sharing our faith with them and bringing them up, giving them that opportunity. But ultimately, they have to make that commitment for themselves too. And it is very interesting. When I was doing some early work here in Aberdeen with a quite eminent child and adolescent psychiatrist, he pointed out to me, which I didn't know before, but if you discuss with young people who they most admire, who is the most important adult role model, if you really get to grips with it, without their parents being present, it is their parents. The impact, the influence that we have as parents is enormous. Even though at that stage of childhood and transition to adult life, it may not feel that way. Why it may not feel that way is because the stages of going through childhood into adult life goes through a number of stages. One is identifying yourself as an individual within a cohort, within your peer group. Where do you fit? And many of you will be very much, you can remember probably when you were at school how important it was to be part of the crowd, wasn't it? Not to be left out, to be included. And when you weren't invited to certain parties or whatever, you'd feel devastated because you didn't feel valued. Finding your place in your peer group and requiring that acceptance and reassurance from others that you are someone to be valued. That takes place during the teenage years. Establishing your sexual identity, dealing with all the changes that are going on in your body and becoming male and female, and those sexual urges and natural feelings. That takes a bit of dealing with. And then, obviously, in making the transition further is establishing your independence from your parents, which you need to do, which can be very painful. Painful for you as parents, painful for the young people themselves. So it's no wonder that at that stage of childhood, the transition into adult life, it's challenging too. And again, this is where drawing on the sacrament is so important. Drawing on that money that's in the bank, that's strength of a relationship to deal with this, because it can put a huge strain on relationships. You begin to wonder yourself, am I really that bad person that I'm being told I am? Everyone else's parent let me do this, and lets their children do this, and you're not. You're different from the others. When you come down to it, you realise you're not different. But this is just a natural part of exploring the world and establishing your identity as a freestanding adult and individual. And you're closer to those years yourself than I am, and you may remember some of those little skirmishes that you had. And please God, married, have children, you will meet those for yourselves. Now, the other part of the marriage commitment that we make is in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part, in sickness and in health. And all of us can identify periods of challenge in our own lives. The most recent one in our family was the death of our daughter, our youngest daughter. And at that time, I can tell you that the strength we got from friends, from our faith, from our surviving children, from the relationship that we'd built up over the years. We were drawing from the bank. Didn't empty it, almost did, but it is so important to, hello, nice to see you, to keep working at the relationship, and don't just assume that everything is going to be fine. You do need continually to put money away in the bank, to support each other, to be kind and loving to each other, to learn the different people that you are, that we all are, and to deal with our own emotions and responses to each other, and to become generous in our time with each other. I think time is the most important commitment that we can make to each other. It's very, very easy in a busy life to get involved so heavily in work, other commitments, that the relationship, we can assume that it's going to be fine. And communication, when it breaks down, is where most problems arise. Lack of communication. So if you haven't had a decent chat about how you're feeling, emotionally with your husband or wife for a month, it's about time you did. Don't leave it. Set a regular date, first Friday of the month or last Friday of the month or something like that. Or one of these islands, one of these little stepping stones when you can spend some time together. Very important to do that. So, I've covered, sort of rambling, a huge area. I hope there are some things that you'll remember. The different people that we are and what we bring to the relationship. The fact that we have help here. We have the help and support of the sacrament that we've committed when we've committed to each other, which we need to draw on. The fact that we will meet challenges in the future. You never know when they're going to happen. It's at those times that you really begin to appreciate the importance of the vows that you've made to each other. Not a bad idea to print out your wedding ceremony, not just the pictures, but actually the words. And to celebrate major anniversaries, 10th, 25th, 40th, whatever, and renew your vows too on occasion, which is a great thing to do. So, I hope that's some useful thoughts and reflections. Obviously, I would have liked to have had Kathleen here with me, but she's taught me most of what I've learnt about marriage. It's something you teach each other. You confer the sacrament on each other and you teach each other. So, I think I'll finish at that point. And if anyone has any observations of themselves, of their own, or would like to share, please do.